Okay, before we begin, we need to know what bias means. So, bias is a prejudice. It could be a preference, it could be an inclination, but this preference or prejudice inhibits fair judgment. Bias is also about being subjective as opposed to being objective. So if you're subjective, you are partial. You do not have the ability to be impartial. So if you're objective, you are impartial. We all have biases, and that's before we get into this lesson, I want you to focus on that idea that we all have our own individual biases. So, subjective, you're influenced by past experiences. However, when you're objective, you're not allowing any bias to affect your judgment. So, how is bias seen in writing? Can you think of any types of text that has bias in them? What about the media? Example, news reports. What about persuasive writing? We can recognize bias in writing by the following. So, these are the 8 clues or the 8 features that will indicate if this piece of writing is biased or not. So the first one is looking at emotional responses. Is the piece of writing filled with a lot of emotional responses? What about exaggeration or stereotypical comments? Does it have one-sided views? Is there no consideration for the other side? Is there missing information? Or do we have positive or negative word choices? And this is really a clear clue. If you're hearing in the writing, the writer saying, this is outrageous, or using words, that is going to really give an emotional response to sway the piece in the way that the writer wants you to think. It might have bias. What about opinions used as if they were factual? So these are the things that you need to consider when you're looking at bias. How can we explain bias? I want you to think about this question. How is it that 11 people can witness the same accident, all with their eyes open, and each account will be different despite the fact that they all saw the same thing? Bias is like wearing sunglasses. The sunglasses represent your past experiences. Example, how you were reared as a child, or previous learning, or previous experiences that you may have had. This is why 2 people can look at the same thing and describe it differently. How can we spot bias? So deliberately using language with a positive or negative connotation can be an indicator. I would like you to consider the difference in these two headlines, they're both about the same student protest. So the first headline says, "Troublesome teens terrorize town." I want you to identify the negative connotations that's used in this headline. So we have troublesome, that's negative. Also, teens, that will have negative connotations as well, because some people believe that the teens, saying the word teens, it has connotations of being immature, not grown up, maybe disruptive. And then the next word, terrorize, that is negative. So already we have a negative association with these troublesome teens who are really causing havoc in the town. Let's look at the second headline. Local students campaign for human rights. Now this one has a lot, it's filled with positive connotations. So local students who are studious, responsible, and they're going about it the right way. They're campaigning for human rights. So they are really making an impact on society and standing up for a cause. So this is really positive. So you can see this is a really good example of how bias can be shown. The same headline about the same story, however, one is very negative and one is very positive. So we're continuing on how to spot bias. So let's look at these pictures. So in August 2011, Mark Duggan was shot by the police, and many felt that his death was unjustified because it was caused by racism and that the police hid what truly happened. And especially now with everything that has happened in America, the cases in America and the protests and Black Lives Matters, we are really scrutinizing the media and how the media represents things. So this happened in 2011, and as you can see, the picture that many media sources used is the top one, the cropped one. I would like you to think about, what does the picture suggest? We're not seeing much of him, just his face, and we don't know why he's standing by that statue. We don't know. You know, he could be up to no good. Now, I would like you to look at the original picture. Do you think cropping the image was fair? Because in the original picture, he's giving a tribute to someone, something. He has a love heart in his hand. It really gives a different picture. The second one paints him as a caring young man, a compassionate young man. The first one leaves a lot to the imagination because of the absence of information. We're just seeing his face beside a statue with nothing else. So now it's your turn. We have gone through bias. We have gone through the definition of what bias is. And I would like you to change these headlines to show bias. So your task is to make them as negative or positive, because bias can be positive as well, negative or positive as possible, even though normally it is the negative bias that we see a lot, especially in the media. So the first one says, Conservative MP loses seat to Labour MP. So how could you make this biased? Pupils do a sponsored silence to raise money for a school trip. So this is positive. You're going to make it negative to show bias, and especially think about that example with the troublesome teens one. Okay, so how can you change it from pupils doing something positive to make it seem like they're up to no good? This money that they're raising, maybe it is not for a school trip, maybe it's for something else. And the third one, so I've given you 3. Teacher goes on maternity leave to have her 3rd child. So I would like you to have a go at changing these so that the headlines show bias. And can you pop some in the comments below? Let me see how you have gotten on with this. It would be lovely to have some examples. So how did we do today? Have we met all the learning outcomes of this tutorial? So we had 2 to define bias, and just to recap, I said that bias can be a prejudice, a preference, or an inclination which is going to inhibit fair judgment. It is being subjective as opposed to being objective. So those 2 keywords, subjective and objective, please add them to your vocabulary. We know that being subjective is being partial. Being objective is being impartial. So 2 other words that you can further add. And then we also discussed the idea that everyone will have bias, some amount of bias. Then we were supposed, the second objective was to recognize bias in writing. So we went through and looked at all those headlines that had the emotional appeal, that showed facts, showed opinions as if they were factual, has negative or positive connotations. So we have that list of 8 features that help you to spot bias. Please go back to that if you have any doubts, or if you just need to go back to remember to refresh yourself. And as always, I gave you something to help to consolidate your learning today. So please go back and give me some examples of what you've done in the comments below. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.